Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Resident Evil review series, and today we're looking at Resident Evil 5. Now, after the changes that Resident Evil 4 brought to the table, one might be a tad unsure as to how Capcom would proceed with this series moving forward. Would Capcom look over the game and think to make more of an effort to preserve the survival horror elements? Or would it openly embrace its newfound action shooter mechanics? Well, if Resident Evil 4 tried to balance the scales of survival elements and action set pieces, Resident Evil 5 smashes that scale, screws balance over in order to become more action-oriented than what we've seen before. And while that direction isn't exactly the worst the series could have taken, it's the series' ongoing instance that apparently it can include both survival and action mechanics that becomes Resident Evil 5's undoing. The story picks up sometime after Leon's adventure in Europe, returning us to lead character Chris Redfield. Chris is now a member of the BSAA, a group dedicating to stopping terrorists from using bioweapons. Chris is also now apparently a steroid user because look at the size of his friggin' muscles between Code Veronica and this game. Seriously, it's just unnatural and unrealistic. Before the start of this game, though, Chris and his old partner Jill were on an assignment to find Umbrella CEO Oswald Spencer, which led the pair to encounter series antagonist Albert Wesker, and this resulted seemingly in Jill's death. Now in the present, Chris finds himself in Africa to stop a new bio threat emerging from the region called Ouroboros. Teaming up with a new partner, Sheva Alomar, Chris sets to find out the cause of Ouroboros, learn what became of Jill, all of which leads him to a final confrontation with Wesker. This plot is kinda lackluster compared to the last game. The game uses the fate of Jill in the final battle against Wesker as a carrot on a stick to prod you into getting to the end. The rest, though, is kind of underwhelming, and a lot of that has to do with the other characters that you run into. There are two other antagonists you encounter along with Wesker, Irving and Excella. However, Irving, who you spent the opening hours trying to chase down, only has about 20 lines of dialogue before you have to kill him. Also, I'm not exactly sure what his importance was in the overall plot. Apparently, he set up the bioweapon in the area, or something like that. I don't know. And Excella isn't even mentioned until halfway through the game, and you only meet up with her well after that, before Wesker betrays her for some reason and she gets turned into a mutated monster. They're not as interesting as, say, Salazar from the last game, or that mutated village guy, or even as memorable as, say, a side character like Lewis was. True, Salazar didn't have a ton of screen time either, but when you make your way through his castle, you picked up the documents explaining what the horrifying things he had done, and this helps you see the monster that he is. Irving and Excella get none of that, though after you kill them, the game lets you read more about them in the library, accessible back from the main menu, so I guess hooray for information after they're dead. Adding to that point, there are a few documents to pick up this time and to learn more about what's going on behind the scenes. Whereas past games, even Resident Evil 4, had a bunch of documents for you to pick up and learn what characters were doing before your arrival, Resident Evil 5 has very little of this. What documents are here just pretty much state the obvious or facts you're already very much well aware of. The relationship between Chris and Sheva is kind of handled alright. There's one section where they get to indulge one another with their backstories, but I felt like it never got more in-depth than that. There's supposed to be some conflict with Chris having just lost his partner with Jill, only to have him now be with Sheva, only he seems fine with it, not really having an issue with either taking on another partner or feeling like Sheva is replacing Jill. Both could have been interesting developments for Chris's character in the long run. The gameplay has been largely left untouched from what worked in Resident Evil 4, though some aspects from that installment have been simplified. You move from point A to point B, shooting what you can, trying to avoid enemies when you can, and occasionally fighting a boss. That hasn't changed in the slightest. The biggest change, though, is that now you have a partner throughout the whole game helping you out. Unlike Ashley in the last game, who you just had to escort and protect, Sheva has her own inventory, health bar, and can help you out in most situations. However, she ends up being more of a hindrance than you might think. Sheva can shoot well enough and she can take out enemies when I needed her to, but her AI goes on the fritz more often than it should. Sheva will always shoot at enemies since her AI doesn't seem to know how to conserve ammo, and so she runs out constantly. Despite ammo being commonplace in Resident Evil 5, she will not go to pick up more, but only in certain situations. If Chris is too close to a barrel or box of ammo, Sheva might not pick up the item since I guess her AI is factoring in that I'm about to do so, so she doesn't. Thanks to the partner system, you'll now enter a dying mode where your partner can revive you. This, however, can backfire since there are sections where you and Sheva can be separated within the same environment, and she can't heal you. Though rather than just having you die outright in these sections, the game seemingly likes to toy with you, having it continue on as if Sheva could save you, and you'll spend a few seconds cursing under your breath, knowing that you're about to die, and there's nothing you can do about it. Sheva's involvement also kills any kind of atmosphere from the past games. Sheva is always with you, so things are never as tense or scary as they could have been if you were on your own. True, you had Ashley in the last game, but that was only again for a few chapters, and she couldn't really help you out. She didn't have a weapon. Ashley was more vulnerable, and if she was killed or kidnapped, it was game over, which also created more tension. Sheva has her guns, and if her AI is in a good mood, she's going to use them to take care of herself. The solidarity of past games is clearly not on display here. Sheva's inclusion also changes how some of the bosses work, and sometimes it can create a bit of a frustrating experience. First boss you face is a weird slime monster that you have to lower into a furnace in order to kill it by burning it alive. Now with 2 human players, one would simply chase the monster into the area, while the other one would hit the switch to close the door on him. Well, if you play with the AI, you have to direct Shiva over to the switch and tell it to press it when you're ready. During the fight with Irvin, there are turrets on the back of the boat which can deal a lot of damage. However, once again, you have to manually tell Sheva to get her ass on the turret to stop wasting her ammo. Though the worst boss fight in this regard is the Ouroboros monster Excella unleashes on you later in the game. You're supposed to burn it with a flamethrower, and then 4 pods will emerge out of it that your partner has to shoot while you burn away at it. Naturally, I grabbed the flamethrower hoping that Sheva would shoot at these pods, only for her to run out of ammo fast, and now I have nothing to shoot at it. I tried my best to do it by myself, unloading a ton of ammo and grenades, which did nothing. Finally, at long last, and sheer aggravation, I let Sheva grab the flamethrower, and I shot the pods myself, and the fight was completed within 5 seconds. Also, sometimes Sheva seems like a big waste that she'll stand idly by while you do something, and I'll explain more about that in a bit. Also, on a side note with the boss fights, some of them seem really unfair until you learn a trick. For example, halfway through the game, you'll fight this giant enemy crab. Didn't really mean for that to be a meme, but it kind of just fit that way. And Sheva will say the shell is too tough, so you shoot at its legs to bring it down, and then you can shove a grenade in his mouth, allowing you to hit its brain pieces. It seems like you could just hit this open spot where his brains are showing, but you actually have to keep shooting its legs, bringing it down, and chucking more grenades down its throat, and this allows you to save a ton of ammo and makes this fight only last a few minutes. The other fight is the final battle against Wesker. The game shows you his weak spot and you'll hit it no problem. Wesker acts all injured and screams and you'll think you're doing damage, only you're actually doing nothing. Turns out you have to hit him twice, and then on his second attack you're supposed to run up to him and get a context sensitive button to finish him off, ending the fight all of within 10 seconds. Well, you might not think to do that right off the bat, or maybe you will run up to him right after the first hit, which has no button prompt. Also, after hitting Wesker, he sometimes does this area impact move that can kill you outright if you're too close. So you might think, okay, shoot him, don't go anywhere near him. Why would I suddenly decide, you know what, maybe I should go near him, because clearly that seems like the right thing to do. The game has also reverted back to an inventory slot system after the amazing suitcase Tetris grid of the last game. You now have 9 slots per character, 18 slots overall. However, as the game goes on, you get a ton of weapons to pick up, like way too many. At one point you get your standard pistol, and that's fine, and then you get your standard shotgun. That's fine. Then you get your standard assault rifle, and at this point you're thinking, well, that's gotta be it. But nope, then you get another assault rifle, and another sniper rifle, and another assault rifle, and another pistol, and another sniper rifle, and another assault rifle, and it just goes on, and there's definitely not enough spaces to fit all this stuff. And along with these weapons, you get their specific ammo, and that fills up even more space. Key items still exist in that separate inventory that exists only in the Void. Similar to Resident Evil 0, you can request items from your partner or give them something from yours. Thanks also in part to Sheva's unreliability, you're most likely going to give her the herbs and items that you might not need. Most times Sheva was just holding all of my guns that were out of ammo and occasionally a grenade. However, the inventory now works in real time, which can create some tense situations, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad. The merchant is sadly gone, and now the shop seems to exist within the void between missions when you die. You can still do the same things at these shops as in Resident Evil 4, buy guns, upgrade them, or buy healing sprays. You can now actually buy grenade ammo, which seems like a bit of overkill, and I'd rather the shops just not sell ammo, as this shopper is already sort of breaking the immersion of survival horror. Also, most of the guns can be found in the levels themselves, which is better than just buying them outright at the store. Even though the shop works basically the same as it did in the last game, I take a much bigger issue with it here. At least in Resident Evil 4, the shop existed in the game. That merchant had to be found, and he clearly was a part of the game's world, regardless of how insane it was that he was always 20 steps ahead of you at any given time. Now you just buy things in the menus, and how does that make any sense? I finished one level with a pistol and some ammo, but now I've started the next level complete with full health, a full pistol with ammo because I upgraded it, and a shotgun that I just bought from the shop. It just feels more cheap than in the last game. There's also no more puzzles to deal with. Well, that's kinda true, kinda not true. There is one puzzle in Resident Evil 5 that pops up about halfway through to act sort of like as an intermission from all the shooting and gunning you've been doing. The puzzle is a standard light reflection puzzle, though it's kind of interesting that you can't cross over the beams yourself since it's concentrated sunlight and it can burn you to death. There's 3 floors to this puzzle where the goal is the same: get the light to hit the next elevator to move on. Now while this puzzle is rather simplistic, it's what Sheva's doing the entire time while you're solving it that makes me want to tear my hair out. She stands up on the pedestal and waits for you. Yet when you complete it, she'll say lines like she helped out the entire time. Resident Evil 5's biggest flaw comes from its desire to still be a survival horror game, but it also wants to be an action game. There are way more moments here in Resident Evil 4 where you have to shoot your way through rooms rather than skip enemies. Enemies sometimes have keys that you need in order to progress, and it's not always clear which ones have it, so you gotta take out as many as you can until you find the one with the key. The chainsaw enemies often have to be taken out now because they're way too fast to avoid, and it tends to be an obstacle that requires you to interact with it to move on. For example, in the oil fields, you have to turn off the fire coming out of the oil pipes, but you can't really turn the valves while the chainsaw guys are running around. Though the biggest support to this claim that the game really wants to lean more on the action is this part near the end. You enter the lab with lickers. The lickers don't really take notice of you, and Chris mentions how their senses must be dull, and you can probably just get by moving slowly. However, not more than 5 steps later, and you're met with a door that you and Sheva have to kick down, making way too much noise and causing the lickers to swarm you. So what was the point of being silenced for 2 seconds? Just go in guns blazing at the beginning at that point. Yet with all this action, the game still limits ammo in some areas, and it feels kind of counterproductive at this point. Take for instance the battle with the 2 turret guys right near the end of the game. You have to kill these 2 as they have the key cards to open up the elevator. While avoiding them, other enemies come at you, and you're most likely going to take them out to make it easier to avoid them and hit the turret guys to aim the focus on them. Well, after this fight I was near death, I hardly had any ammo, and yet now I'm supposed to fight Wesker in the final fights like this. And there's moments like this throughout the game where you'll be thrown into an area, forced to shoot a bunch of enemies, then be told, hey, no more ammo, good luck, and then it can be put into another gauntlet where you have to fight things again. Another nagging issue is how Resident Evil 5 feels at times like Capcom had a checklist on hand of all the things Resident Evil 4 did, and they plopped them in here. See if any of this sounds familiar. You start the game being attacked by a crazed villager, and then have to hold out for a few minutes in one set area. There's a level set deep within a mine shaft, enemies with a chainsaw come out at certain points, and there's another fight against El Gigante in addition to a part where you're stuck in a building and a guest character helps out. The enemy types are also kind of the same. You've got your crazy villagers, the villagers whose parasites pop out of their heads, the shielded enemies, and the enemies with turrets and guns. Also, the later chapters where the villagers use guns is just plain trash. This game is not designed with gun versus gun mechanics in mind. You can stick to cover, but by sticking your head out, it can still get you killed. Bullets also take a ton of damage off your health bar, and they can cause you to somehow trip in the weirdest way possible. Also, after completing the story, there is some stuff to engage in. There's 2 campaign missions called Lost in Nightmares and Desperate Escape. These are not full campaigns, in fact they feel like cut levels that could have been in the main game. Lost in Nightmares takes place during the Chris and Jill mission to find Spencer in his mansion. It evokes a ton of nostalgia from the first Resident Evil game. The mansion is designed to look just like the mansion from the first game. Hell, even when you open up the doors, the camera shifts into that first person view from the loading screens in the original. There isn't even a ton of shooting in this section either. In fact, there's a section where the game takes away your weapons, and this might have been a cool feature to see in the main game. Desperate Escape takes place at the tail end of Resident Evil 5 where Jill and Josh fight their way back to the surface to aid Chris and Sheva. This mission isn't as striking since it feels like something that could have easily been in the main game. There's a ton of shooting in this section and it's just not nearly as fun or nostalgic as Lost in Nightmares. The Mercenaries also returns, though at this point Mercenaries is no longer the opposite of what a Resident Evil campaign is, since now both the main game and Mercenaries is focused on shooting the hell out of everything in sight. Though to its credit, Mercenaries is fast paced and you can have a lot of fun with it. In short, Resident Evil 5 feels way too much like Resident Evil 4 for its own good. It's like the younger brother living in the shadow of its older brother. Anything it did, it's trying to do better. It's still fun and worth a look, but it clearly went further down the action shooter route, and some Resident Evil fans might not take too kindly to that. There are a ton of aspects gone from previous game. No puzzle solving, saving isn't an issue anymore either since it's all manual saves or automatic saves from a autosave feature. Even some of the new additions like co-op are not really enough to set this game apart from Resident Evil 4. It's essentially Resident Evil 4 HD Chris Redfield edition in that sense. So, the Resident Evil review series will continue next time as we're back looking at a spin-off in the franchise as we conclude with the second light gun game, Resident Evil: The Dark Side Chronicles. Thanks for watching.